I'm going to always remember how when I was in Mikdash Melech for the year, so they took us to Rav Yosef, the whole yeshiva. And a lot of the boys that were in Mikdash Melech for the year were on a spiritual high. They were feeling that they became very religious. They were very happy that they became very into their learning, very into their praying, improving in their keeping the Torah, the mitzvot, becoming more religious than their families. And they would come to the Rav Yosef expecting that Rav Yosef is going to give us some big Hidushim. Thank you so much. Ya'avdu Chamim. And we went to Rav Yosef expecting him to teach us some big shiur in Bet Yosef, in Alchot Shabbat, in Alchot something. And what happens? Rav Yosef after a few minutes looks up at us. We're all in his office. And he says to us, when you go home to America, you have a very, very big mitzvah. When your parent walks into the room, no matter how many times your father or your mother comes into the room, no matter what you're learning, no matter how important your learning is, you know what you do? You get up. He stood up. Wow. He asked them, how is there in any way I could help you, any way I could be supportive, anything you need? You stand up like this, and he sits down and gets up again. He said, and they go out of the room and they come back into the room, and each time you stand up again for them. That's what he told us. And we were very shocked. Seeing him jumping up, we were all expecting that we're going to write something new that we didn't know. What's the hidush that you have to stand up for your father when he comes to the room? This is what we came for? Every little kid knows to stand up for his father when he comes to the room.
You guys do that, don't forget.
So what was the lesson that Chacham Ovadia was teaching us? He was teaching us that you guys, you became more religious in your families, and you're going to come home, and you're going to be having parents who it's going to be hard for them to see that all of a sudden you become a rabbi, you're being more strict than them, and there's going to be conflict. So what's the solution? The solution is ultimate respect. The solution is, you see, if you think that you'll be spiritual but not sensitive, there's no such thing. If you're more sensitive, you're more spiritual. If you're less sensitive, you're less spiritual. Do you understand this? And we would think that he would tell us some other hidushim, Chacham Ovadia, but this is what we needed to hear. We needed to hear from the rabbi about this lesson. That the more religious you are, the more sensitive you are. That was the lesson he was teaching us. So even though we thought that he's going to tell us, he's going to stand up, he's going to show us how to keep Shabbat, how to put food on the plata, on the electric plate, no, he's not teaching us that. He's not teaching us about kashrut, how to check for bugs. He's telling you how to stand up for your parents. That's what he taught us. So you shouldn't make any mistakes. The importance of that when you come home, especially now that you're being more religious than your father, stand up for your father even more. Don't come home and say to your parents, you know, the way that you put the heating up the food on Shabbat is not good. The way that you are praying, and the way that you're putting on tefillin, and the way that you're sinyut, and not good enough. Don't say anything like that. Because that means that you're not sensitive. And if you're spiritual, if you're religious, you're sensitive. Let somebody else tell your parents. You don't have to tell your parents.
Let the rabbi say it, no?
Let the rabbi say it. Let the parents see how the child, by him being more religious, he's more pleasant to have around in the house. You know, it's very interesting that Parashat Mishpatim, it starts talking about tells us about how when you buy an Eved Ivri, the first thing after Hashem giving us the Torah, what does He tell us? He tells us how to treat your slave. He tells us that you know how it feels to be a slave in Egypt. You know how it feels to be a slave yourself. You're not going to feel the other slave how he feels to be a slave. The first thing He tells you to be sensitive. And where does He say the mitzvah of Ela Mishpatim? It says it next to what? The law of the Mizbeach. The law of the Mizbeach. What is the Mizbeach? The Mizbeach is a place, the Beit HaMikdash. Next to the Mizbeach, Ve'ela Mishpatim, is supposed to be the laws of having courts. And what type of court you're supposed to have? What are the laws of the courts? Which means to tell us that when you have a court, where's your court going to be? Next to the Mizbeach. Where was the Sanhedrin, the greatest Sanhedrin? Agan HaSahar. Where was it? Right next to the Mizbeach. Why? To teach you Dishkata Gazit, that if you're not able to learn how to treat your friend properly and you don't have proper monetary respect for the friend, right, then I don't want your korbanot. Your korbanot are not worth anything to me if you don't know how to understand and be sensitive to how you're damaging other people. And Ve'ela Mishpatim, we learn right after the idea about the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach has to be specifically a ramp. It has to be specific. Why a ramp, not steps? So that when the Kohanim go up on the ramp of the Mizbeach, they shouldn't spread their legs too much. And then you see the private place of the Kohen, disrespectful to the stones of the Mizbeach. And from there we learn, if you have to be respectful for the stones of the Mizbeach, Tal Vahomer, you have to be respectful for your friend. Unbelievable.
Oh, this is like the stones?
It's telling you,
No.
no. He's telling you that you have to be respectful of the stones. So Hashem says you have to have a ramp. Why do you have to have a ramp? So that you should not be disrespectful to the stones when you step up and they'll see your front side when you go into this bayah as a Kohen. So what are you supposed to do? You have to have a ramp. So next to the law of sensitivity that you're supposed to have for your friend, you're supposed to have from the stones kavahomer to your friend, that's the next law right before you start talking about the Torah. Ve'ela Mishpatim. To teach you that the idea about if you are not sensitive, you are not spiritual. If you're not sensitive, you're not religious. This is the Torah. There's no other Torah. Right after Aseret HaDibrot, what do we learn? The mitzvah of being sensitive. From Mizbeach. Right after the Aseret HaDibrot is what? Is the law of the Mizbeach. That the law of the Mizbeach has to have a ramp, not have stairs. You know, it says that when a person gets divorced, the Mizbeach cries. The Mizbeach cries. Why does Mizbeach cry when somebody gets divorced? You know why? Because the Mizbeach is teaching you to be sensitive. And you didn't learn the lesson of the Mizbeach. You didn't learn that the sacrifices is not as important as being sensitive to the next person. And that's the reason why the Mizbeach is going to cry when a person gets divorced. You know, we know that the whole parasha is talking about sensitivity. It tells us to be careful from an almanah. It tells us to be careful from a yatom, from an orphan. It tells us to be careful. You know why? Because if there's tears, if they start to cry to Hashem that you weren't sensitive to them, Hashem's going to answer them. Why? Because Hashem is very, very sensitive. You know, it's amazing how the way it works is that before we come to pray, we're supposed to, of course, say, I am accepting upon myself the mitzvah of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Love your friend like you love yourself. Do you say that? The Arizal. The first thing of Shachrit is, Hareni mekabel alai mitzvat aseh she'v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. That I love my friend like I love myself. And that is mentioned, not only that, also you're supposed to give tzedakah before you start your prayer. Why? To show, because if you're not sensitive, then you can't pray. Ani betzedek ehezed panecha. I come to see your face, Hashem, with first being a tzaddik, with first doing something nice, being sensitive. Why? Because that's the way that Hashem wants us. Why? Because Hashem himself is sensitive. How do we know that? Not only did Hashem reveal himself in the thorn bush to show that he's in the pain of the Jews, but even more than that, we know that Hashem is sensitive because we find that when I opened up the sky and the Jews saw Hashem's throne, what did they see? They saw that under Hashem's throne, under his feet, is what? Is a stone, is a big sapphire stone. Why is there a big sapphire stone so under Hashem's feet? Hashem says to the Jews that not only were you carrying the stones in Egypt, the whole time you were carrying stones, I was also carrying a stone.
That's not what I mean.
So they see in the heavens that they saw that under Hashem's feet is like the shape of a sapphire, a stone of sapphire. Why is there sapphire under Hashem's feet? Because Hashem is also carrying stones, or we're carrying stones. And we see also not only that, it says, that there was a purity in the sky when they opened up the sky. You know why? Because Hashem was rejoicing, he was happy the Jews were freed. So not only does he share in the pain, he shares in the rejoicing. This is the way of Hashem. This is the way of Hashem.
I'm at the moment.
And this is where we see that there was a great rabbi. He would come home every Erev Yom Kippur. He would go out for a year and come home Erev Yom Kippur. His name was Rumi. Rumi was a little bit extra heavy. And one year Erev Yom Kippur, he was very involved in his learning, and he came home late. He delayed coming home. And the rabbis tell us that his wife was expecting him to come, because he comes back every Yom Kippur. Learns the whole year. He was sitting in the attic at the time when he was learning Torah, didn't stop learning for a year. And then all of a sudden, what happens? The attic where he was sitting caves in, and he dies. Why? Because his wife cried that he's not home. How come he's not coming home? Why is he late? He doesn't love me? See that? Now, how do you explain? You think his wife wanted that his husband should die? No. But because when you are not sensitive, this is something that you can't ever overlook that. It's something that is like fire. Starting up and being this sensitive is fire, and it's something that is not forgivable. This is what it means to say that Hashem has sensitivity even for the thief. We know that a person who steals a cow is different than somebody who steals a sheep. The one who's carrying the sheep, he pays back. He has to, 4 times. And the one who steals a cow, he pays back 5 times. Why? Because Hashem feels bad for the thief who's carrying the goat on his shoulder, carrying the sheep on his shoulder, and therefore he pays only 4 times. You're having sensitivity for the thief? How does that make any sense? And the answer is Hashem's teaching you sensitivity for everybody, even for a thief. We find this also true that even a Rasha, a wicked person, you would say, why should I should hate this guy, right? He's a Rasha. Yimach Shemo, erase his name. We know that it says that when you have a mitzvah of 2 people to help, you're supposed to help your enemy first. Why help your enemy first? So that he shouldn't say the reason why you don't like me is because you hate me personally. You have to show him the only reason why I don't like you is only because of the behavior that you have. But I have nothing wrong with you. I have problem with your behavior. You're supposed to be sensitive even to the guys with a shop. Even the guys with a shop. You mean to say, let's say I drive past yeshiva, come to the corner, and there's 2 guys for me to take for a ride. I only have 1 spot in the car. Who should I take? The guy who is a good guy, or the guy who's a very weak guy in learning? Take the weak guy. You know why?
Oh.
Why? See that? Why? Because the Rasha, you don't want him to think that you don't like him, because he thinks already you don't like him and he's taking it personal. So you have to be sensitive to that. We are only allowed to hate a person's behavior. We're not allowed to hate a person's himself. There's no reason to hate a person himself. And this is what it means to say, why? Because when we are able to show people the way of the Torah is the way to be sensitive, we're able to show that we are being godly. We know that the 2 luchot, Aseret HaDibrot, right? There was one of them was Ben Adam Lamakom, between man and God. The other one is Ben Adam Lahavero, between man and himself. Now, if you look at the verbiage, the amount of words of the one of Ben Adam, the Makom, right? There's a lot more words there than the Ben Adam Lahavero, between man and himself, and his friend. That means to say, if you look at the 2 tablets, The one that's between man and Hashem, right, has much more words. The words are much smaller. But the ones that have an Adam Havero was much bigger because there was much less words and has to fit on the same size tablet. So it means, what does Hashem want to show you? The main thing in the Torah is Ben Adam Havero. That's why Rabbi Akiva's students, although they were tremendous time in the Hachamim, but if they weren't sensitive, the Torah is not worth it. Baruch Adonai, Amen, Amen.
Wow.